Yes, you're right.
Thank you. So welcome to tonight's meeting. My name is Councillor Jacqueline Daly. I am the chair of this Housing and Homelessness Policy and Accountability Committee. Before we begin, there are some housekeeping points to cover. First off, as you can see, the meeting is being live streamed on YouTube. So by taking part, you are consenting to being recorded. If the fire alarm sounds here either continuously or intermittently, I will adjourn the meeting and we'll leave the meeting via the staff fire exit, which is behind me to my right. We have security officers here who will lead us to an assembly point. And there are tea, coffee, water, biscuits available in the staff kitchen, and the toilets are on my left-hand side. Right, lovely. Just the officers, could you please introduce yourselves before speaking for the first time? And would everybody please remember to turn the microphones on and off as they're speaking? So first off, apologies for absence. I've received apologies from Councillor Asif Sadiq. Declarations of interest. Do members have any declarations of interest that they'd like to bring? Okay, lovely. So then point 3 on our agenda, the minutes. Now, first of all, I'd just like to address matters arising from our meeting in November. I've been able to review both the recording of the meeting and the minutes, and I'm satisfied that no actions were outstanding. May I remind members that within the Constitution, we may request information and updates from housing and homelessness officers at any time, and requests for updates do not need to be made formally during meetings. Do members agree the minutes of the meeting held on the 30th of January 2024 as an accurate record? Members? Oh. Councillor Alford, Councillor Alexander? Lovely, thank you. Okay, we have a slimmed down agenda this evening, and members have been asking for a little while to be able to review the repairs policy and the ombudsman process. We now have the special report, and by having just that report on the agenda, I think we're giving it the time and the focus that a report like this really does require. I'm seeing this as something of an extraordinary meeting, and we'll get back to our forward plan at the next meeting. So members will all have read the Housing Ombudsman special report. So I've asked officers to prepare reports for this meeting that will enable us to scrutinise the changes to repair handling and complaints handling that were set out in the recommendations, particularly those on pages 38 and 39 of the special report. And I think that we have 3 presenting officers this evening. Is that right? So Richard Shui, John Pickstone and John Hayden. Can I start by asking, Councillor Ume, would you like to speak before officers, or would you like me to come back to you?
Thank you, Chair. I can say a few words before handing over to officers. So, yes, good evening, everyone. I would just like to start by saying I'm really sorry. I think you know that I've apologised to the residents who have been affected by all that's been raised within the Housing Ombudsman's report and special investigation, and where residents have been let down, they have been compensated, and the council has worked hard to put things right. And myself, like the rest of the administration, we want to make sure that residents can live in homes that are safe, decent, that can help contribute to them having all they need in life to thrive. And that's always been our ambition and commitment in our housing strategy, in our manifesto, as well as everything we pledge to make sure that residents get the service that they deserve. Officers are obviously going to talk through the report, and we'll talk through some of the work that's been taking place in order to address what's been raised within the report, specifically covering those cases that were raised from a few years ago, but also talking about the work that's been taking place since. And I know this committee has heard about some of that work already. And obviously officers will be going into a bit more detail about that this evening, but Yeah, it is disappointing to be here and having to discuss this report, but I think it's really important that we do this. I think it's really important that there is that scrutiny and that oversight, that committee can see that officers of the council, myself, have been working hard alongside the Ombudsman to put things right for residents, but also working with residents across the different forums that we have, really trying to listen, to continue to listen, to make sure that we're taking their views on board. And I'm very thankful for the different forums that we have, because I'm always there continuously listening to them, and making sure that we provide a service that they deserve. Look, I think we're all sort of acutely aware about, you know, various challenges within the housing sector, but this is, you know, specifically about the work that we're doing as a council to put things right. So, I mean, I'm sure there'll be an opportunity for me to say more. So I'm just going to hand over to officers to present, and then we can get into the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ume. Officers, I understand that there's a presentation as well as the report. Lovely. Thank you.
Great. If we could get the slides up, please. So, good evening, everyone. I'm John Pixton, the Strategic Director of Economy, and I'll be giving the presentation tonight. And then we as a panel can take questions and discuss that and support the Cabinet member in that conversation. Good, sir.
Yeah, there's some percent there. I'll try and put them on screen now.
Yeah. Great, thank you. My apologies to anyone watching at home for that delay. I was clearly a problem somewhere in the organisation sharing the slides. So to reiterate, I'm John Pixton, Strategic Director of Economy, and I was going to give this presentation on the Housing Ombudsman report ahead of a wider discussion. So in terms of an overview, the Housing Ombudsman, who is the ultimate arbitrator in disputes between tenants and landlords, wrote to Hammersmith and Fulham following some concerns they had on a number of cases that have been presented to the Ombudsman. And as part of the report, they examined 33 cases relating to complaints received between April 2019 and May 2023. It is worth noting, though, that those cases have been through our complaints process And also, there have been some severe backlogs of up to 18 months at the Housing Ombudsman side, which I know they've been working hard to rectify, taking on additional staff. So some of these cases are quite dated. I think that's worth underlining at the start. The point of the report was to look at those cases and to identify and assess and analyse H&F's policies and processes and procedures around repairs and complaints handling in relation to those cases, but also, and importantly, to identify whether there was service-wide failure. Were these cases indicative of wide failures in the housing service, or was the problem contained, to those areas, reflecting the cases, repairs, the complaints? So there was a number of issues identified in those cases. Delays in conducting repairs due to a variety of factors, including knowledge, data management, and managing contractors. That sometimes repairs were poor quality. There was a lack of tracking and post-inspection of works. That the council didn't always sufficiently consider the impact of extensive delays on vulnerable residents. There was complaint handling delays, that the council would try and support residents, try and offer dates, support, but sometimes promises then end up being broken if contractors didn't turn up when they should. The complaint response was sometimes inadequate, and compensation could be inconsistent, and there was a failure to learn from some of these issues within the council. So those were issues the Ombudsman raised with the council. I think what's important at this juncture, just before I start talking about the next slides on the screen, is that the council's journey of improvement predates the Ombudsman's intervention. So the council set up a number of processes, procedures, structures, changes to the way it did things, and was very live to this problem. Now there's a substantial problem, and it has been a substantial problem for some time, and it has taken some time, and we're still on a journey of those improvements. But this was not sparked by an Ombudsman report. That came partway through our journey. So the outcome of the report, following the Ombudsman writing to us last May, getting information from us in October, and with some other iterations, meetings, data sharing, etc., in the summer of 2023, was a 44-page report that they published in February of this year, 2024, which focused on 7 of the 33 cases. There was 8 key orders made and 10 recommendations to improve, focused on those areas that I described earlier: repairs, complaints, and compensation. And the council is ordered by May 2024 to publish and provide the Ombudsman with an action plan about how the council is going to respond and deal with the issues raised in those 18 orders and recommendations. So as part of this process, go to the next slide, please. The council has obviously reviewed internally, done a lot of work internally, worked with our politicians, and has also responded in a statement to the Ombudsman report. And I think this slide summarises that well. So first of all, as Councillor Ume said at the start, the council has apologised to the residents affected by letting them down, in that period that the report describes, compensated, and we've worked hard to rectify where we've let people down, and we've, as a council, reiterated our regret. We've done so with meetings with residents, we've done so in the media, we've done so in more formal council meetings. So, and we've done so in residents' properties and individual correspondence. So there's been a wide range of ways, the council has communicated the regret and apology. As Councillor may set out, we strive for very high quality, fair and compassionate services. We are very much, as an organisation, on a journey to providing those. And as I said before, there is still some work to do, and we're transparent about that. But we have come a long way from the time of those cases, that the Ombudsman was discussing and describing. We worked very closely with the Ombudsman. This was noted back to us. You know, they came in, we provided the information, we were transparent, we were supportive, we wanted to learn from them, we wanted to learn from the process, we weren't resistant in any way, and the Ombudsman recognised that. The Ombudsman noted our leadership's positive approach in this, as I said, to learning from this investigation and building on the improvements that we'd already begun. And I think it's really important here just to note that the council takes a very corporate view of where services need improvement. So it isn't just left to kind of Richard as housing director in isolation. You know, the senior leadership team, including the chief exec, lean in to support, and this is typified by the chief exec setting up a task force in 2022 to drive forward the requisite changes in the organisation. And the housing ombudsman, recognised that we are on this improvement journey, recognised the number of successes that had already taken place by the time of the report, and our continued ambition to improve. So, next slide, please. This report, I think, needs contextualising, as I said, not only chronologically into that journey, that we set out upon, and which this has formed a part of, but also, the breadth of the transformation in housing. It would be remiss to focus solely on repairs and complaints. This is a service; it should be looked at holistically. Different teams need to be intertwined. Needs to have those synergetic relationships between each other in order to really deliver the success we're seeking. So, our work as a council, as I said, started before the Ombudsman report, is also broader in scope. That includes, the task force I talked about. We set up at the time of the tragedy in Rochdale, a damp and mould action group that I chair. And I chair that because that, again, is a corporate response. So it brings together public health, asset management, social services with housing, to make sure we take a really resident focused approach to damp and mould, and we don't just kind of look at the physical aspects of the property. So the number of damp and mould cases has been driven down substantially. That's noted in the Ombudsman report, and the proportion that are dealt with in time is now much, much higher than it was at the time when the regulator wrote to all councils just after the tragedy in Rochdale. We have, in my period, tenure here, I think it's consistently good building safety compliance. We undertook an external audit of that last summer to double check that. That confirmed, those standards, and gave us a relatively small number compared to many other councils of recommendations to follow through. The bulk of those have now been completed. We're investing 729 million to modernise our housing stock over the next decade. The housing hub and the complaints handling process has been much improved. So by having people coordinating, choreographing, providing expertise about how to deal with complaints, those are managed, they're not falling down the cracks. And so since last September 2023, all stage 1 and stage 2 repair related complaints have been answered on time by this council. The call centres have been improved. That's helped by, as I said before, wider service transformation. We're reducing the number of calls people are having to make because repairs are getting done. The people aren't having to make so many repeat calls to chase the council and our contractors. But also we've invested in new staff, in training, to make sure it's a better engagement and better experience when people call us. So that's moving in the right direction. John Hayden here tonight is our Assistant Director for Repairs. And back in April 2023, myself and Richard went to the Cabinet with a plan to invest in not only staff, but also contractors, which was backed by the Cabinet, invested in by the Cabinet, and we're really seeing the fruits now in terms of improvements to our repairs number. So reducing the backlog of work we still have to do, especially reducing those cases that have been long outstanding, reducing disrepair, voids. So there's a number of different categories, a number of different KPIs we're following where improvements going the right way, and having a cultural change programme. So we recognise the limitations of KPIs of process. This is about the housing service as a whole, from the most senior people to the most junior people buying into something, wanting to transform, wanting to improve, wanting to support our residents in every position and seeing themselves as a single service and working together as a team. So we have invested heavily in that sort of transformational cultural change too. On repairs, because this is an important aspect of the Ombudsman report, you know, we're conducting 50,000 repairs a year now. And as I've said, we've reduced that backlog, damp and mould, legal disrepair, and we've moved forward, you know, with work to hire additional contractors. And we expect in September to commence work with a new patch contractor taking over from Morgan Sindall. So the tender went out publicly yesterday for that. So we're hoping to get interest from the market. So to contextualize this situation, I mean, the Housing Ombudsman has now written reports on a number of different registered social landlords, be they councils, be they housing associations, and is also currently investigating others. I think what's interesting about this slide, and the point I'm making here isn't to say, well, look, actually, there's some promising statistics versus other registered social landlords, because, you know, we're on our own journey, we're focused on our own journey, and we're focused on our own success, future success. But nonetheless, I think it's reassuring when one looks at the right-hand side of this slide versus the left-hand side. So on the left, you can see the number of cases determined, the maladministration rate, the orders made in those cases, the compensation. And those figures, you know, don't portray H&F in a particularly favourable light. But the last two columns, you know, are much more positive. So that's the number of orders and recommendations in the Ombudsman report, okay? And you can see we have the lowest total there. So when they came in, you know, and they came in for due reason around repairs and complaints, they haven't then expanded that to orders about other parts of the services, or, you know, deeper orders around repairs and complaints, because of that journey the council had already been on in rectifying many of these issues. It was confined to that total of 18 orders and recommendations, whereas you can see it's higher for other social landlords. So moving on to the final slide. So, I mean, the most important point here is about the residents, and is that the council let down too many residents in the past, and that is why fundamentally the Ombudsman came in. And again, you know, the council reiterates its apology for that. Secondly, that we accept the findings of the report. As I said, we worked closely and as close as we could with the Housing Ombudsman around their investigation, supplied the information, received the recommendations, and we were, of course, going to improve the service in line with their recommendations and orders. And also that the report does note, in amongst the reviews of the cases, it does give some space to the present day, and notes in that our positive approach, the strong leadership, and the improvements made by the council. We'll continue making improvements linked to their action plan they've required from us. Also, more broadly, we know that further improvements have to be made, and we will listen to residents, including at all forums. So thank you.
Thank you very much, John. Members, you have questions for officers? Councillor Alford.
Quite a lot to say tonight, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
And I will try and keep it brief. To say that I'm appalled is an understatement. Two Ombudsman reports, both appalling. One on damp and mould and now on repairs. This council, it's all very well saying you're sorry, but you should be a heck of a lot more than that. You have let every resident down. And I, as a councillor, am ashamed, and I'm not in administration. It is all very well to say we've heard, we've listened. I'm the longest standing councillor. I have sat through more meetings of hearing exactly the same lines. We've heard, we've listened, we're going to make improvements. Well, we wouldn't be in this state if anybody had heard and listened. Now, I can tell you to date, I haven't seen any improvements. I am still getting complaints. I got one today, again, about council officers not listening, contractors giving them one order, them doing another. So that hasn't improved. And So that's a summary of what it is today as an opposition councillor from my residence.
Okay, can I respond to that, Chair?
You've got, and I haven't finished, but would you like to start with that one, or would you want me to give me my
No, I think it would be an appropriate juncture to respond to that from Councillor Alford. So, I mean, your first point that we let all residents down, I would disagree with. I mean, the repairs service is now doing over 50,000 repairs a year. You know, that's been approaching that number for some time. Yes, it's absolutely agreed. We've let far too many residents down, but you know, the majority of repairs are done to satisfaction, are done to time, and those numbers are increasing. So, as I said earlier, we've reduced substantially, you know, the backlog of repairs. We are getting better rates of satisfaction around repairs. Yes, there is more to do, yeah, but I don't accept the premise that nothing's changed, because we have a number of statistics now that show quite dramatic changes in the repairs. So, for instance, the number of repairs outstanding over 12 weeks is, as you can see in our latest newsletter, down 90%. You know, the overall number of repairs that still need doing, you know, is down by just under 30%. So these are fairly substantial shifts, yeah, and you know, reflect an improvement in service. Now, clearly, we're not going to get every case right. We don't get every case right, and where we don't, we acknowledge it and we rectify it as soon as possible.
I'm hopeful, but I'll wait to be convinced. I raised a long time ago about the suitability of our contractors. Now, I realise we have to be careful here. In my area, have gone through 2 contractors not performing. I raised it with the then cabinet member, which wasn't you, Councillor, maybe the previous one, saying I thought they were underperforming, to say the least. I was told, oh, no, it's all going to be fine. But then you left, we lost one. I can never get their name right, United something.
United Living.
Yeah, then we went on to Morgan Sindel, who I was told, oh, they're going to be marvellous. Well, I think we know where we are with that. I was at the cabinet meeting and I realised we have contractual. I have no faith that the next set of contractors I'm going to get foisted on my residents is going to be any better. I don't know that the processes are going to have been improved. I know you're saying they are, but I've had so many years of hearing the call centre, it's get the training, they're going to have a different ethos, they're going to listen. I need to be convinced, because I'm frankly at the moment not. And
So if I may make 2 points, I think then I'll pass to John in a second. But I mean, there are other councils, I think, where it's fair to say that Morgan Sindel's finding it a little challenging. So I think that's worth noting to give a broader picture. But also, you know, a lot of thought is going into how we contract the next package contractor, how we incentivise, how we penalise, how we work with them, how we manage, how we communicate. So this isn't just a kind of replacement, this is also improvement in process. I'll pass to John to add some detail there.
How you doing, John Hayden? Evening, Councillor Alford. So I agree with the way the operating model has to be changed, and what the intention is for the procurement that's landing in September is what we have in an arrangement now with our contractors. And as of Monday this week, we started a process where if we get what you're seeing historically is multiple repairs that just don't get managed particularly well, whether it goes into a contractor's machine or we raise orders from a contact center and go through, because you can be the best person on the phone or raising jobs in a system, but you're reliant on the detail of what goes through. So the big step change we've had with some of the work we've done with Councillor Ume and Richard and John over a while is that where you get a job that's 20 days in the future, which is a routine repair, if it's a multiple repair trade, within 5 days, we'll pre-inspect the repair. So that for me is the biggest step change that we decided to introduce, which we haven't done before. So what that means is it gives the contractor and ourselves the chance to go and look at the repairs and scope them out once they've been raised, still meeting the date, 15 days later that we've raised, and then sending the resident the report that captures the details from the conversation we've had in their home, and then turning up in the day to do those repairs. So when I looked at all the disconnect that we've seen in the multiple cases, like I had back through, that's the single biggest piece that was missing, in my opinion, from working in repairs, is that, you know, if you raise a job for a light or a plumbing or a tap, you know, the contractors just need to be managed as single trade. So that step change on multiple trades will allow us to actually manage and give a single point of contact to the residents, which is the biggest thing we've had here. We've got more direct control in terms of where we're going, rather than an operating model with an inclusive figure. So this time we've decided to price per repair. So you get a minimum charge, and then the contractors only get paid on inspection of complicated repairs, and built up in evidence of that with some heavy and post inspections through to the residents. And we got to help the contact center. I know we do training and all that, but we're in there now. The contractors, the newer contractors came in July, August, September of last year. They're embedded in there now. And I personally believe that you will see a measured improvement over April, May, and June. I've seen it now, but in terms of, you know, casework, complaints coming in, some of the learnings we've taken from the Ombudsman, if you look around, a lot of it is long lead-ins, complicated repairs, not being clear where we're going to repair, replace, and following through and case managing. So a lot of that has been taken out of the Ombudsman's report. We were looking at it anyway. Councillor Ume and John and Richard were on that journey before I joined. And the contracts really focus around that, and then just tailoring the service differently when we've got vulnerability in the home. So there's a lot of work gone in and just knowing who's in our homes. You know, we had the home surveys, the condition surveys, and trying to adapt those services slightly differently. So there's a lot of change there. And there's more direct control as to how we needed to operate, and we'll see the disconnect in real time.
Thank you, John. Councillor Alford's absolutely right that, you know, a lot of the kind of the general has been talked about before. I think what I'd like to hear from you guys now is, again, thanks, Councillor Alford, if you'd give me a moment. What I think would be really useful is to go through each of those orders that the Housing Ombudsman made and talk to us about what's been done and what's going to be done. And that perhaps will answer some of those questions that we all have about, well, so what's different this time? And I think that as far as scrutiny is concerned here, what we should all be really focusing on is what those orders are, where we are now, and where we're going to be and how we're going to get there. So would you mind giving a little bit more detail to the orders in the report, please?
I can do. So there's 8 key orders. 5 were on repairs and repair management, complaint handling, and then there was 3 just on complaints themselves. So there's 8 in total. There's also a whole plethora of recommendations, which I think we'd be here forever if I started to go through. On the key orders, it was more around learning from cases and systems and timescales, which was a big one in terms of, you know, something come through the contact center, contractor systems, our housing system, casework management systems, and tying all that together, because there was quite a discombobulated, you know, management maybe historically. So a lot of work's gone through on tying them up together with dashboards and data in one place. And I know we're doing a lot of work on a CRM system now, so that will help no matter who calls in. You will flag up. So if you rang in about rent issues, but you also had outstanding damp and mold issues that you haven't heard back on, historically, you would get one or the other, where now you will get a call handler will be able to see different bits and pieces. They'll see you have issues, they'll be able to follow up, whereas those systems were disconnected. So a big piece of work's gone into tying those systems together to manage homes rather than manage individual services. So that was one of the big ones. And we're not there with all this yet. You know, we're working through a lot of this. Another one.
Sorry to interrupt, John. So in the report, you're talking about now having weekly meetings with contractors and putting in penalties. And
so in terms of contract management, slightly different. I mean, they went on to how we manage the services. So, and in fairness, from July of last year onwards, or probably earlier, we were doing that. So weekly core groups, whip meetings. Don't know whether Richard wants to come in.
Yeah, Richard.
Yeah, Councillor Daly, if you don't mind, if I can just interject, if I may. So I'm Richard Schwer, I'm the Director of Housing. I've been Director of Housing now coming up to a year on this permanent role, which I'm enjoying. But at the same time, I do want to apologise sincerely to all residents, tenants, leaseholders and councillors for the poor performance we have had in housing. As I said in my initial meeting a year ago, we are creating a brand new team. It is taking a journey of transformation change. And as I said previously, it's like a massive big oil tanker, which we're turning it around. It's going to take time, and we are part of that process. One thing what we have done is have a proper understanding that we're one team. When I first arrived, we were quite silo mentality. We didn't have a repairs team. If we recall, we've had to create those members of staff and undertake that. The extra bits of things, what we are now doing is that we have now got a contract officer who manages our term contractors. So what that means is that we have a contract officer who manages Mia's contract, which is one of our contractors. We've got a contract officer who's working with Morgan Sindall, and they do it on a day-to-day basis, not just 9 to 5. They are doing it from 7 o'clock in the morning till 10 o'clock at night. That is their job. We never have done that in housing management before. We've talked about it, but we haven't delivered on it. We are delivering on it now. And that is why one particular contractor is no longer here, and we've moved that contractor on. The other thing what we've also done is that we've enhanced the DLO. So that's a direct labour organisation as well. So we've got a mixed economy of contractors and also our in-house team who've actually undertaken service provision and delivery. That has actually enhanced where we've actually taken over sheltered housing repairs, and where our complaint services have actually improved from roughly when that Morgan Sindall were undertaking, which was 60% satisfaction rates, which I believe that, John, I think we're now in the 91%. Now that is showing that we are turning that ship around. I take on board Councillor Alford is saying that it's going to take time, and she's heard these things before, and that's what residents have said to me. But at the same time, we are also getting now compliments for people saying to us, well, actually, you are listening, you are making those change. The proof's in the pudding still, Mr. Shway. Let's see what you can do. But we are making those things, and the staff, you've got committed people. Finally, I would just like to add, we are triaging there will still be things where we might get things wrong. We are human beings, but at the same time, we are triaging, we're understanding what the issues are. We have the MERS contractors, we have the Morgan Sindall contractors, we have the DLO working with the contact centre to analyse what we need to do and make sure that we have the right people going there and making sure that they deliver on time what they said we're going to do and deliver. So I'm not saying that we're not there yet, but we are moving things in the right direction.
Thank you. So a lot of the orders were about how we communicate, how you communicate with residents, and how you keep contractors in line and delivering.
Yes, it is. I mean, on page 14 and 15 of the paper which I've written, it's said about the Housing Ombudsman said, and we did.
Yeah.
So, for instance, they've said they would like us to integrate systems across teams and contractors. We now have robust management. We have weekly team meetings with contractors. Financial penalties for poor performance, that wasn't happening. That is now happening. We're sharing residents the feedback. We all go to residents forum meetings. We have an understanding of what needs to happen. The senior leadership undertake that in housing services. One of the other things which we are looking to do is improve our communications to residents about disrepair, address legal disrepair, claims within 20 working days, provide detailed schedules of work, and ensure that there's a single point of contact. Previously, there was several points of contact, and making sure that we have trained staff who understand what the situation is in the repairs team and understand what that actually means, and making sure that people are accountable for their actions. And, Councillor Alford has mentioned to me in the past that she has seen a lot of people move on and left, and we haven't recruited. We will do that, because if people are not good enough, they shouldn't be here. It's not fair for residents. And we need to make sure that we have better services and we have better staff members who understand what we need to do.
Thank you, Richard. John, could you take us through some more of those orders, please?
Yeah, no problem at all. So Richard laid crossed the majority of them there, in fairness to them. So some of the second order was a communication process for repairs and disrepair and different services. So when something's with an ombudsman, something's with legal disrepair, stage 1, stage 2s, and just the communications with the residents and making sure that we took the learning from our complaint handling back across different services. So that, you know, long lead in was a big one when we were reviewed by the ombudsman, and some of the cases it was about people waiting for windows, people waiting for roofs. You know, it's not necessarily just the repair of sorts, but it's the time of people going back out and not communicating back to residents. And that was a big issue. One of them was around changing with contractor and quality was another one where we changed contractors and moved things around and not being very clear about talking to residents about that change and step. But the big change there, which we've embedded, is the quality of repairs and the feedback from quality of repairs. And for example, for voids and disrepair, we're post-inspecting them with our residents panels in terms of quality and quality feedback from, you know, key residents across the borough. So we're getting really good feedback from that, so people see it. We're also getting, you know, CSAT satisfaction, which is tracking quality of repair once we're there, is on the rise across a lot of the new contractors and MERS and DLO. So there was a big thing in the Ombudsman about changing contractors, managing quality of repair, and feeding back in and evidencing it. And obviously we got the strategic head of repairs who's not here tonight, Stephen, is working an awful lot with those residents, just doing those step changes and repairs. There was another one about internal information and how we hold and record things, and how we evidence when we have and haven't discharged services and case handling. That's a big key order from the Ombudsman. So again, we have pre and post inspection reports, surveys. We're now sort of circa signing off 30% of post inspections. Typically you do 10 to 15 and drop down when you're in a steady state. But just as we track through, we're about 30% at the moment. And we do internal audits on our surveyors. We can see when there's a pre-inspection, if there's a report there, if there's not a report there, if there's a quality issue. So that's all feeding through in terms of, you know, supporting that. The big one was making meaningful changes to the services when there's vulnerability and flagged vulnerability, and evidencing how we change how we deliver services for people who are vulnerable. So changing the contract, Councillor Ilford mentioned earlier on, and some of the stuff we talked with Councillor May. We've introduced a 5 to 7 day priority when the new contract lands in September. We do it now for Abbott's Law in terms of damp and mold, because we're compliant with that when that came through anyway. We were making those changes, you know, in terms of risk and de-risking homes. Category 1, anything that is a hazard in the home, you know, it's 24 hours. But again, if we have to change the service based upon somebody's needs in the property, that's a big thing that the Ombudsman wanted us to track and evidence through. And some of those systems joining up and knowing our homes and making sure that when somebody raises a repair, it's flagged and that we'll deal with it differently. So we're on the journey to that, which is a big part of the housing regulator as well. So that they were the main themes across the 6 key orders. They sort of crossed over, but there was lots of recommendations that sat on top of that about creating clearer processes, maybe creating new procedures for certain types of repairs, maybe being a bit clearer about lead-in times for long lead-in windows. We've done a lot of work around decants and, you know, people who've been moved in and out of homes and just supporting that vulnerability where there's damp and mold. And we, you know, working with our NHS practitioners to, if somebody's got respiratory issues and we're aware of it, we move people out, we deal with the properties and we try and put, you know, systems in to fix it. So a lot of that was in the recommendations, which we were on the journey to doing. And now we're capturing it where we've got gaps, we're evidencing it, and then, you know, we can come back in again. So that was it around repairs. It really was around management, communications, not being clear, and when we changed services, letting somebody know it was going to happen and following up. And I think the big thing from, as Richard said, from a repair service that's pretty much been recreated again in the last 12 months, was having a single point of contact where people could get in to talk to us, you know, for those multiple repair jobs, because 90% of what we get should go through a contact center to our DLO or a contractor. But there are cases where we just need to pick it up.
John, one moment. Richard, do you want to come in there?
Chair, the other thing I would also like to say is that it's about also we've been looking at our complaint management process, how we've managed and dealt with our complaint handling. So we've set up a dispute and resolution team. So while we've done that with the repairs team, we were also looking at how we actually manage and improve our complaint management and handling process as well, because the two go hand in hand. And that's why we set up the housing hub. So if you recall, about several months ago when we came to the scrutiny, to the PAC, we talked about what the housing hub was all about and what we were looking to do and develop. And that was our diagnostics tool team about understanding how we can actually improve our service delivery, look at complaint resolution and management, look at stage 1 complaints, look at stage 2 complaints, and manage things properly and better, and learn from the Housing Ombudsman recommendations, which in the past we've not probably have done as well as what we should have, but we've now been able to actually show that and demonstrate that when we are moving towards things improvement. In fact, the Housing Ombudsman is actually asking us, having other London local authorities come and speak to us about how we're doing it. So if we were that poor, why are they asking now for our advice to go and speak to other local authorities about how we've done it? So I just wanted to give an example of some good practice which we have done and understand where we have come from on this journey of improvement, which needs to improve, which we need to continue to improve. It's all about total quality management processes. We need to get things better and continue to learn from the loop of with our complaints management.
Thank you. Recognise that. The heart of some of the things that you've been saying there, John, if I can just bring them together, is something about keeping good resident records. I mean, one issue that councillors and residents have is speaking to somebody different every time and getting a slightly different message. And what you're telling us is that a lot of these systems are about making sure that that's a single. Okay. Do members have any questions about that kind of record keeping and that sort of resident experience moving forward?
Yes. Then I've got a few more questions.
Yes, I have, and thank you very much for the presentation and for explaining these things through. I do look at this slightly through my day-to-day job as an engineer and looking at processes in place. And in my casework, I'm seeing improvements. That doesn't necessarily mean that the screws and the nails are going in quicker or whatever else, but I see that there's an acceptance of the problem and that there's a plan to get things done, which is, and you'll have to forgive me because I do sort of want to try and get some detail, because the detail gives me a sense of assurance, and then in turn that's my sense of assurance I can pass on as reassurance to residents. So I think until you give me more information to ask more questions, but what I wanted to see, I think it looks to me like a little bit of a vicious circle between document control, process management and standards. And I see this on day-to-day things, and that can be something as simple as projects or voids did a job here, it's not to standard there. Repairs say, well, that's not within our normal portfolio, and that's what we do. So there's that thing. So I'm looking for this detail and assurance over future document control and process management, and also standards. We do have standards, but maybe they need up issuing or tweaking. But there needs to be somebody who takes some authority over those standards. Not that they're arbitrary and say, no, every screw will be brass plated. We don't want that kind of stand. We want somebody who's got some authority to be able to make those decisions over standards, and that when contractors or our own DLO, when they deviate from that work, that's properly recorded, which again, that goes back into the vicious circle of document control and process management. I don't know how much you can speak to that, and I'm sure I'm going to have to write to you afterwards because I'll have 101 questions about the answers you've given. I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, Councillor Alexander, I agree with what you're saying, and it's nice what you've said, but we can do better. I think what we've started over the last 12 months is we have weekly service improvement board, and that is a bit of a Q&A about all of our work streams and understand where we need to do and how we need to, and officers have to be accountable for their areas of work. And we are looking at all different areas of how we can actually improve on that. So we are looking at void management. We look at how we look at tenancy management in neighbourhood management and how we actually need to improve on that. Councillor Alexander. And also, I think what we're also doing is that we're taking officers at head of service level to take that responsibility and accountability, where that's where we need to get people to understand that's their responsibility and accountability, and they can do that rather than take it all the way up to, let's say, a director of housing, which may have happened in the past. People need to be taking responsibility at head of service level, taking that responsibility and manage what needs to occur, and actually move contractors as well as resources at the right place, at the right pace, at the right place, and ensure that we deliver what we say we're going to do. And that's where the accountability needs to sit.
I'd absolutely echo Richard's comments there. I mean, in terms of sort of specifics, you know, I passed to John and the repairs team, but you know, one of the things we look at in the call centre is how those calls are recorded and then passed on in terms of repair. So, for instance, on a tap needs replacing kitchen tap or bathroom tap, and the different taps, different parts. So that kind of focus on detail to make sure we get the right information at the start of the process, and then to ensure that our systems speak to each other, that people are recording on our electronic systems, not on sort of individual spreadsheets within teams and day-to-day managing within teams. So the whole service has access to that information, the kind of key drivers for us. John, do you want to tell further?
No, I can do. So the stock condition surveys have been carried out to standardise the stock, because there's been lots of different bits and pieces done over the last 5-10 years. So we're just capturing now what's standardised in those homes. Without going through the specific details, and I think, Councillor Alexander, I think we'd have a meeting separately to hear, because we probably, as per our previous exchanges, go on and through the detail quite a bit, but to make some significant change and using the data we have. So, for example, we brought the White City into the DLO because it's 20% of all our repairs. So all our repair demand across the city is in one area. So obviously to have something to benchmark against when we have a new provider in, and we may look to replicate this across the city because it's a pilot for a year. But the feedback we've had from the sheltered schemes and the first time fix, because we've had the same type of staff going there, but that's stock in van, which allows us to placate some of those issues. It allows us to go through and actually develop with the residents. I think the big step change, which Richard and Councillor May were very clear on at the start, was once we got there to a place, we take the service out. And I think, you know, it talks about, you've heard it before, but to embed it repeatedly on our estates. So we have 5 to 10 estate action days on other estates, which we're going to go and walk around with councillors and walk around with residents and do surgeries. We're going to do MOT style reviews on those estates. We're going to try back to get them maybe 2-3 months back to those estates again, drop in, meet the residents and move around and keep going back. I think that's a big thing at the moment, you know, with our contractors, with our staff, the staff that work in certain estates, just keep going back through the detail, looking at the quality with the residents and the feedback from them living in the homes, because, you know, a lot of people don't feedback, you know, whether it's good or it's bad, and to get that every day. So that's the big change for me that will happen from April onwards to July. It's the mobility of taking the service out. It's trying to get through or speaking to residents that maybe can't email or don't want to email or don't come to the meetings, and meeting them on those estates and doing some drop-in sessions where we're there and people know we're working from an estate for a month, and then we move on to the next one and move on. So that's the big change for me, I think, in terms of detail, quality, and, you know, and taking the service forward.
And I think the final thing I would just like to add before we'll get more questions is that we also have decided to have our own depot. We haven't had a depot for many, many years. So we are now going to have a proper housing depot where we have people there understanding what needs to happen and making sure what we need to do. And that's a different philosophy than what we've had in the past. So I think one thing which I said when I first came here several months ago as well is that what I'm wanting to do is bring back old school housing. That is, if you look at what the legislation is talking about, that's what people want. That's what our residents want to see. They want to see people, they want to see staff, they want to see people on the ground, listening to them, doing the job and making sure that they do it in a quick time.
Thank you. You've got a follow-on question?
If I may.
All right, lovely, thank you.
Before I go to that, I would say that the prospect of a depot, considering the diversity of housing stock we've got, and many components and repairs are non-standard, that you actually need something that you can control with that flexibility, and that's ultimately the only way you're going to win through. And so many organisations have discovered that to their detriment from 1990s thinking. So that's very commendable. Just on covering the process control, when residents are phoning in and we're capturing that repair, I'd like to see that we have some quite prescriptive documents that control that process, and that when that process isn't followed or it goes wrong for whatever reason, not as a fault blaming or finger pointing, that is flagged up, so that in the event you and I, or you're talking to I or any other councillors, you can immediately have that at your fingertips and say, look, that's how many we had, that's how well our process is working, that's what's going on. And just as the main follow-up question, which is, it happens, and it happens in every walk of life, where work is paid for and the work wasn't necessarily done, or it wasn't done to standard for genuine, it happens. But we need to be able to capture that. And the one that I think is a weakness in councils is, because councils are always were cash strapped, they always are cash strapped, and they always will be cash strapped, that if for some reason work hasn't been invoiced, people tend to think, oh, that's great, you know, that we've saved a few quid on that. But I think that should be flagged up on a procurement system, that we have, you know, uninvoiced works, and it's not to necessarily to catch people out. It's a way of capturing that, and I'd like to see a far stronger link with the not the detail on the procurement, the fact that there is a procurement overview which is done in, sorry to throw out things like Airbus and Rolls-Royce and other companies. That's when major faults are picked up, where bills of materials are checked, and where the money going in and out and the invoices are checked. Years ago, you couldn't do that, but hopefully with computerization and robust IT systems, that's something that you will be able to do and take forward.
If I talk about complaints and complaint management, and then John can talk about what we're looking to do, what about aspects about what you've said, not acting like Boeing as a company, you know, recently with what they've been up to. Well, I thought I would mention them, but what I'm trying to say though is, on the complaint management process, is that we have changed that. What we were tending to do, which was wrong, we were actually picking up calls and then we were just saying, right, I'm picking up the call, and then we're cutting people off. We weren't really looking at understanding what the complaint was about. So we've changed that, and that has changed over the last year. That individual head of service is no longer with us. We got a new team who's undertaken that. There are scripts there. We have got analysis what's been happening, and we do have part of the weekly service improvement report where the complaints head of service, customer care, comes and we analyse the data, real life data, understand what needs to happen, and challenge that, and saying, why are we having those abandoned calls, and how can we actually improve on that? So we have got that data which we're able to share and can show. John, do you want to talk about how we're dealing with?
Yes, I'll just counter back through that in reverse. So we'd have a minimum charge call out, which was only paid for repair completions. We got 2 phase completions moving forward. So we got practically operationally complete. They've evidenced that they've done the repair, and then we've got financially complete, which will come afterwards. So we'll be able to follow both jobs where the contractor is saying the work is done, but they haven't claimed for it, or they're saying it's done and we've approved it to be claimed. So we put that step change in place now. We'll have some order values, which we will minimum value of 10%. We'll post inspect with our quantity surveyors, which have arrived. Everything over £250, that's a repair. So we've made that commitment moving forward. So we only pay for what we get, and we'll have a big management of recalls. So working that back through, that's how we'll value them. So we'll not only post inspect on quality, we'll also post inspect on value as well, which gives us a larger number of properties just to safeguard what we're paying for.
And the work that hasn't been paid for, hasn't been invoiced, how do we pick up on?
So that's a bigger problem for me. So I have a budget which I work to. We have an accrual. So we will accrue and liabilize a value based on the scheduler rates, which we'll measure through. So we will have financial meetings there. I will know exactly what my forecast is, what materials I'm paying out for, what I'm not paying out for, what should be claimed, because we will make a value regardless of the contractor's value. We will send them a payment certificate, pay less certificate, and I will know what I'm due to pay, because obviously I'm, got the HRA revenue account, the capital account to look after, taxpayers' money. So I will know the run rate roughly about what we'd spend, a number of volumes of repairs. We've done 3 years of analysis based upon the cost model we're getting moving forward. I know what it's roughly going to cost, CPI indexed, and we know what we should be charged for those completions as well. So there's 2 things you'll follow in any business: quality work and feedback, and spend against budget. Those 2 things tell you where you are.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Councillor Alexander. Can I just bring it back to the kind of the resident experience and contractor transition? Do members have any questions to ask specifically around that area? Councillor Taylor.
Thank you. I'm just asking about nuts and bolts questions, really. First of all, thank you for all the work you're doing. And like Councillor Alexander, some of my residents are noticing the difference. One of my questions is, when an appointment gets cancelled, a no-show, so the resident has taken the day off work, waited all day, and nothing happens, you talked about triage. Are they then triaged that it becomes your responsibility to help the resident and get them booked as a priority? Or is it up still to the resident to chase up? Because it does seem sometimes the onus is on them to then recontact you to say somebody didn't turn up.
Okay, so yes, it's ours.
Okay.
So I think when we arrived, as Richard talked and John talked about earlier on, the volume of the backlog works that were overdue were quite significant.
Mm-hmm.
So at the moment, we're sitting about 70% of our jobs in target. That was opposed to probably about 85% out of target when I arrived in July. So we've been focusing on the quality of repairs and getting the repairs done to where we are now. We've got about, 600 to 700 jobs sitting that are 9 weeks old. So we're trying to get the service back in time. How we redesigned it is this: if on the day you have 20 days booked up, it's going to happen from, I think it's the 8th of April, but I'll send that back to you after the meeting. We will call you on the day, to say you have a repair today, are you in? So we don't get a phone call, we don't miss it, we'll still turn up for the appointment. The operative goes there, they will wait 10 minutes, they'll go, they'll knock, they'll put the cards through, then they'll call us. And then we, in terms of the repairs team, will take the call, we'll call the resident. And if they're not there and we can't get them and the contractor can't get them, we'll let them go to the next job. We will email the resident to say, our contractor's called you, we've called you, here's your appointment, please come back to us to reschedule your appointment. So I think that's a big step change. And what I've asked for is a job in jeopardy report, which I'm running now. And that's why we're here till 7 or 8 o'clock, because we haven't quite got it right yet. I'm 5 or 5:30. And what that tells me is, from a new contractor, is what's been delivered that day, what overran, and what we didn't get into. Because what we want to do is then call at 5:30 to maybe 6:30 or 7, and a resident may need to rearrange it, and we'll rearrange it for them rather than send them cards back through. They can call through an email call through to us, but some people genuinely aren't there, and we'll be able to slot in other jobs, and we may have to move that job later on. So that process, as I described it there, we should see that we've got 120 jobs other than emergencies in a day because they vary. We're pre-inspecting the complicated routine repairs that we talked about earlier on. So I'm aiming for an 85% completion. Stephen's aiming for 95%. He's not here tonight, so I'm going to say 85. But so we got 85 to 90% of our jobs landed on the day, and we got that 10% to worry about where we might have overrun, but we should ring the resident and tell them, look, we're not going to get there for 3-4 hours. Do you want us to do it another day? Do you want us to come today, a bit later, et cetera, et cetera. So that's all needs to be managed by us. Once you've raised the repair through the contact center, and once you've had a booked appointment with a confirmed piece of work, my view is you're in the repairs team. You know, so that customer journey is in the repairs team. There are times where they'll call through the contact center again because, you know, we're out and about, but we should manage the repair disconnect with the contractor. They should be calling us before they leave any job, and we should be checking in with our resident just to see if they're there or not, or we have a different number or different email address. So that's ours.
Thank you, Richard. You wanted to add something?
Yeah, just that what we've also found out, Councillor Taylor, is that we have caught subcontractors not doing their jobs. And yeah, really. And we've booted them off the contract because, you know, if they say that they're not going to, if they're there, why they're not there? So we have, you know, and that includes myself. When I've been out and about and seen a particular vehicle or checked on a particular, why is that vehicle there? Or, you know, checking on what's been happening. That's what we've been doing. So people, senior leaders in housing, are doing that as well. So in the past, maybe we haven't undertaken that, but for me, that's the most important thing. If somebody's taking their day off, you know, when I've had to take a day off for British Gas and British Gas doesn't turn up, let's be honest, it's not a great thing, is it? So that's not good enough. So we wanting to make sure that we don't end up in that same situation, and we have taken action when contractors have promised that they've been there or said that they've been there, and we've actually got evidence that they're not there, and we've moved them off our contract.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Richard. I was going to ask, actually, are all contractors on board with this kind of new way of working?
This is the contract of the way that we're working, and this is what we expect, and that's what the decision of what we have been undertaking. It's part of our terms and conditions of the contract anyway. We're just doing what we said that we're going to do and actually show where the evidence is.
I mean, it's not just old contractors. There's been new ones who've come on. You know, perhaps they're not, haven't got the demand to types of work, you know, issues. We will move on. But I mean, I think, I mean, the two key old ones are Mears and Morgan Sindall, and John and his team done a fantastic job in managing Mears and really driving up the proportion of jobs that they're doing in time to quality. Meanwhile, as is public knowledge, we're ending our relationship with Morgan Sindall. So, you know, John, as set out earlier in that process, will ensure that the new contractors that replace Morgan Sindall, you know, work to very high standards.
And that's going to put a big test on contractor transition.
So just before I come on to contractor transition, before I lose all my hair, not just the majority of it, the big change on what Councillor Taylor was saying there, and is that a lot of these contractors subcontract some of the work. So we have an approved subcontractor requirement where, you know, we have to vet them, they have to be financially sound, make sure they're getting paid, and I don't think historically contractors have been very open to that, particularly if you look at window repairs and that. So again, at the start of last week, and we will do, the subcontractors who we approve to work on the contract will be in our offices, and they will be there. So if somebody's using a glazing firm, you know, as far as we're concerned, it's Hammersmith and Fulham. And if they're subcontracting work to them, they will have a scheduler in that office, not just a contractor who's a middle person to a subcontractor, making sure we deliver on quality. So we'll treat them the same in this model. And we've set that out, that we expect anybody who delivers services for a provider for residents in our home to be in our offices. And that's been a big Achilles heel, because when these contracts got under pressure, or they would subcontract works out, and because all it's the nature of contracting, but it's no good to us in a home when it goes wrong. And the mobilization is a big one. And the key is that we worked very hard to get the WIP back into time. And we've worked very hard to get the jobs done and drive the quality of repairs up. And I think the last two transitions from a contractor to a contractor has left the previous contractor with a massive number of jobs from months and months before. We won't have that. So when we come in on day one, when the contractor comes in, we have contingency plans for what our departing contractor leaves us with. We will recharge, we will work with them to get them completed, whatever the path of least resistance is for them. But when our contractor arrives in September, they will start work for the first time being raised to them, and they won't pick up 30 or 60 or 90 or 6 months of historical jobs. We're going to make it clean. So we'll be reasonably in time by the end of April. I think that's the first time in a while. We will work particularly hard, and the DLO has really helped, because the DLO that Hammersmith and Fulham have employed from last year, and how Councillor Ume and Richard and John crafted that, it's really helped us to deliver some of the services connect. Now they're delivering repairs directly for us. We're seeing the benefits of that as a mixed economy, because it has to be. So we get to September. The trick here is to keep the satisfaction going up, keep the quality going up, keep on top of the whip, like you said, and the missed appointments, and Councillor Taylor, but to give the new contractor new work. Not to cancel and re-raise, not to, this is 4,000 jobs. That's the big, whatever we do in the mobilization, the customer journey needs to come with it, but that is the key. And that's really what we're working on right now. And we'll see what staff we have to 2P over, but we'll deal with that as well.
I think finally, Councillor Daly, I just would like to say we are understanding about contract management in a different way. So my background is contract management. That's what I've done. And what we are starting to do is not just start on the journey of saying this contract in September. We're already gathering information analysis for the next main contract. So it's a different way of doing things, to where in the past we've maybe done, right, we've done that, right, next one. Instead of actually saying, like, contract management should be part of our DNA going forwards, and understanding and analysing that, and understanding about mobilisation and decommissioning of services, so that it's part of our day-to-day life. And that's the other reason why we've also undertaken additional contractors on board, subcontractors, and directly understood about the business and get that model better shape than just relying on one or two patch contractors.
Thank you very much, Richard. Members, are there any more questions about contractors in particular? Councillor Ume.
May I just say a few words? Just obviously, yes, in addition to what officers have said here, I think it's just really important that we take a moment to really focus on contract management and making sure it's effective. This is the way that we can ensure that we're holding contractors to account, to make sure that they're delivering a service that our residents deserve. And we have some fantastic officers, and John and Richard and others in the team who are going to make sure that the new contract that is in place will be effective, that it will be managed effectively. And that's what we're seeing now, that sort of tighter grip, that accountability, as Richard was describing, where people are being held to account if they're not delivering, to make sure that the repair service is functioning as it should. And I think it won't be lost in the committee some of the many challenges that have been faced within this borough. And Councillor Alford, you mentioned previously, having obviously served on this committee in many different capacities, and obviously having led the service as the cabinet member as part of the previous administration. And I mean, this administration inherited a real mess in 2014, and were challenged specifically by the repairs contracts that had been inherited, and the many challenges within that took many years to sort of get out of. And after getting out of that contract, then obviously faced a number of different challenges. I mean, we've talked about this before, all the external factors that have been a real issue. But I think what's really important in the discussion here, you are really hearing that detail and that leadership and that ownership that is taking place from the senior leadership team, from the administration, to really make sure we have an effective contract in place for residents, and with the current contractors, making sure they're managed effectively. I would just like to make that point and give thanks to the officers for the work they're doing on that front. But we still have a journey. There's more to do. There's a way to go. But I think it's really important to hear about those details, because it really demonstrates that commitment and drive to make a difference.
Thank you, councillor. You may agree. It's really refreshing to get into the detail and hear exactly how that tank is going to turn around and exactly what happens next. Members, are there any more questions around contractors or?
Well, I've still got more questions. I'm allowed to ask them.
Of course, sure. Councillor Alford, would it be useful if you asked a number of questions? And
Right,
thank you.
yes. What about after post inspections? You mentioned it vaguely, but I mean, how often and how many properties per are going to be post inspected physically? I mean, I can understand satisfaction surveys, but I've never got a great time for them. How many are you actually going to go and check that the work's actually been done? That's the first question. I've got two.
So for
Do you want to hold on a moment?
Oh.
Councillor Alford, do you want to give?
Well, the
a few
other
of
two
them and then
is
ask?
basically going slightly at a tangent as to how much compensation you've actually had to pay and how much is still outstanding. And where is this new depot going to be? Because one of the things I've seen over the years, and I'm afraid it is with one contractor when I've been travelling around London, they've been all sorts of boroughs with our logo on it. And I'm wondering what on earth they're doing in our different boroughs when they have no relationship with them, seem to be carrying out works there. So I just don't want it to be another day out for the contractors.
So working back through that, we got vans and van trackers, so I know where every van is. I tell you that I check it because I look at how many jobs and job completions the contractor does, how long they're at a home, when they start, when they finish, they do travel in, and that there are vans. So we got vans and van trackers. So that is my.
I don't think they're normally travelling in, say, 12 o'clock in the sort of midday.
It depends on the shift working. It depends. It might be doing out of hour work, 12 to 12. They've got set times we release now. Depot, we've got one on Cunningham Road. It's in Borough. All our depots will be in Borough. We've got another two. We probably have one out by Clem Attlee. But we've got some different depots around the city. Again, picking back on Councillor Alexander's point, the stock that's hard to get, because not everything can be fixed by repairs, believe it or not. We might need some investment in stock or age stock, which the capital team are doing and planning. So we hold on to bits and pieces, valves, all window seals, et cetera, so that's all in Borough. And we got a DLO officer called Jade who looks after the vans and the van stocks and the logistics. So we stock that from here and we buy stock from local businesses in Hammersmith. So we don't buy and distribute out. We try and make sure we provide in there. I'll come to compensation in a minute because I'm not too sure of an answer for that. Post inspections, we will do 100% of pre-inspections where it's multiple repairs. So that's about 40% of our repairs. So 50,000. John's the math guy. So a lot. So we're gonna aim to do about something like, be honest with you, 14,000 pre-inspections a year for multiple complicated repairs where they go into 20, 60 days, because that's where all my complaints are, right? So trying to get them in there, turning off repair them and then checking homes that have had multiple repairs and going to visit them and trying to capture it once. We'll get some of that wrong, but we're on it. Post inspections for what we call emergency repairs, which is probably about 40% of all our repairs, 10%. So we'll do 10% of that stock as a post inspection physically. And we may make some calls on top of that to get 50% totally captured from a repair side of things. We will post inspect anything over the self-authorization limit, which is about £250 to £500. So any repair over that, we will post inspect. So we'll have a sign off when it's completed and the resident says it's completed, but we won't financially sign it off until we go and post inspect it. So as I said earlier on, maybe a mixed economy of a surveyor looking at quality or a quantity surveyor looking at a monetary side of it, measurements, et cetera, et cetera. So that is where we're going to go from the start. And that's across the DLO and our contractors. Compensation, I don't know. Because so obviously there's the compensation guidance. I don't think we're due any compensation. There's obviously complaints where we're assessing any open stage 1 or stage 2 complaints and they're assessing, distress and stuff like that. So that's sort of dealt in the hub. And where we had a services connect for a length of time, there is a policy, but I don't have that number to hand. I can easily find it, but I can't find it right now.
Okay, thank you.
Is that all of it, or is there more to come?
I'd have to check. I don't think that covers every single compensation we've made.
What I would add, and Richard said this earlier on, is that if there's a disconnect because of a provider, we recover that money. So what we'll do, we accrue it together, and where it's part of the payments because the contractor didn't do something, we will recharge that or pay less their payment. So we're protecting, our service as well as supporting our residents.
Councillor Orford, may I add on to your question there? In the Ombudsman report, there was a reference to different levels of compensation for the same thing. And one of the recommendations was to have more of a transparent shopping list, if you like. Is that something that's in process now?
I think in terms of consistency, where there have been more recent ombudsman cases, the level of compensation the council has already given ahead of the ombudsman report has very much matched what the ombudsman is recommending. So I think that's a very good guide that the council is getting its compensation levels approximately right in each case.
Lovely, thank you. Debbie, would you please just make a note of an action point to get some of those compensation figures through for members, please, in the minutes? Thank you very much. Can I move the conversation on a little bit to some of the policies and the policy updates that we've been looking at? Note in your report that you're talking about sharing learnings with the Housing Ombudsman and looking at what policy updates there might be. Can I ask what policies in particular you're looking at? And can I also ask at the same time, how will we know if those policies are working, and if they're not, or how will officers be able to iterate to make those policies work?
I think one thing what we are starting to see is that we're having less severe maladministration cases coming through. We will always have a process where the tenant can actually go to the Housing Ombudsman and doesn't have to follow our complaints procedure. Now, from my point of view, I think that's not the right thing they should do. I think if there is an issue, they should come to us, but the Housing Ombudsman said that they don't need to. So there's always that situation there. I think the other thing is that we are starting to see where we are now tracking when we do have Housing Ombudsman matters relating to, we actually are doing a so-called analysis of those so-called of those Housing Ombudsmen to see whether it's a severe maladministration, a maladministration or service failures. Recently, we are getting more service failures, which is still not great, but at the same time, it shows that the direction of travel is going in the right direction. It's still, it's still hard when you get any service failure or maladministration or severe maladministration case. And that's one of the things what we undertake with our policy procedures, and part of the legislative approach, which will be from the 1st of April this year, is that we are going to be in more of a regulatory approach to things. So we have to comply with the Housing Ombudsman guidance. That's what we're undertaking. And that is a process what we are looking at. So we are looking and updating all of our policies, procedures across the piece, because at the same time, we also need to get ourselves ready and fit for purpose for the potential of an inspection, which will occur in the next 4 years in housing.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, I think the importance of policy and procedure is clear, and that can vary from right across to broad, like a housing strategy, to quite detailed operational matters. But I mean, the golden thread here is they need to hit the standards of the new regulatory environment that Richard referred to. So there is a push on this. We have to take on extra staff at the moment. I think it's having a clear adherence to those standards, to national guidelines, to national advice. There's been more, I think, participation and visits and attendance at kind of national events with the regulator, the Ombudsman, offering that. Also, because we've had a greater churn of staff in the service recently, I think we're absorbing more best practice from other places, other local authorities. And then there's something about kind of just good practice in policy making, you know, that it doesn't have unexpected perverse outcomes. It's clear, it's easy to follow, and most of all, that it's used and adhered to. I think one of the issues in the past as a service, you know, we had policies, but they weren't always followed. So that management of the use of policy is important. And as you suggested, Councillor Daly, it is quite a fast changing and emerging regulatory environment. So we need to be able, you know, continually updating where appropriate these policies to ensure we're compliant.
Thank you. Richard, you want to add something?
I think the other thing about the culture, we are putting residents at the heart of the matter, and that is a different way of working to what we've said before. You know, not just lip service, we do really mean it. We do really care about it. We deal with things, you know, John and I might be dealing with things on a weekend, which none of you might know. You shouldn't need to know, but we are dealing with those things to make sure that so that we get things sorted out for that particular tenant, or making sure that there is a particular issue with one of our older housing blocks where we need to decant and make sure that operation, those things are done. Now, what we are also doing is that we're having a lessons learning process from that, and that's where the hub is coming into its way, because we're learning from that and people understand what we need to do and focus our attention on building safety regulation as well. And I think that's an important aspect to say from a building compliance point of view. If you look at our top 6 areas, we are, you know, 99.9%. I did ask Mr. Buckley today, who's our Assistant Director for Building Safety, when will I get 100%, Richard? Well, Richard, you'll never get 100%, but that 99.9% is showing that we are always on top of those top six areas of work: asbestos, water, heating, gas, all those aspects where, you know, we need to make sure that we're on top of and making sure that we're looking after our resident, our tenant, and our leaseholders.
Thank you very much.
And Chair, just to add, and I think you were alluding to this, Richard, just in terms of the big 6 areas, there has been an audit that's taking place to give that added assurance to committee, that there has been that added scrutiny to make sure that all the checks and balances are in place, to make sure we are sort of meeting every standard on that front. And you know, some really good recommendations came from that, but there was strong assurance that everything is on track and everything is being done appropriately.
Thank you, Councillor Ume. Members, do you have any more questions around that? Councillor Alexander.
Yeah, thank you. I don't know whether I should be asking Councillor Ume rather than asking about I like the sound of management of repairs to completion, and I'd like to see that more of a kind of maybe not a policy, but something, some sort of commitment that we can show to residents that we are, you know, that we're going to manage repairs to completion. And if you are able to do something like that, I'd like it sort of maybe subdivided into communal repairs, tenant repairs, and then for a separate division for sheltered housing. You might have some additional ideas, but just in my day-to-day experience, I'd find it very, very useful, and I think residents would understand what we're explaining to them if we can break that down as those 3 areas, and particularly because of there's finance, the way things are financed, the whole of that, but this management of the repair to completion, because I think many things when we look through the Ombudsman report and we end up with complaints about the complaints process, and these are the things that really the silver bullet would have been the management of the process to completion. If you don't mind me, suggestion.
So I agree. So the sheltered housing is the quick win, as I say, and we've been pretty much focusing on that since last September. And I think in terms of feedback and reassurances, we attend the sheltered housing monthly meetings with the housing officers, because I know people, you'll always end up with a repair, but you know, because something's always broken. but the, we don't manage the homes in terms of the day-to-day supporting needs. But our biggest customer should be the housing management team and the resident that lives there. So by that ilk, we go to the sheltered scheme meetings once a month. We look at the repairs that are in there with a DLO. We go back the next month, and that brings confidence in there. The communal repairs will come from the estate days that I talked about, taking the repairs out. Because at the moment, our focus was to get ourselves back into a steady state and look at the procurement of new contractors, but to bring confidence back in there. I know Ian and Mark weren't here today, the new area neighbourhood managers, building estate action plans. So short term, what we're going to do before now, next month, medium term, what's the next 12 months, and then long term, 5 years, major works investments, going back with those plans every month to the residents on the estates and going through the repairs that are getting done, looking at communal repairs and walking around and talking it through and showing that they're completed. Those are the two things that we'll pick up. The tenanted repairs, as I said, we went through the inspection numbers. We can't get to every home, physically, because our contractors will turn up and do repairs. They'll do good repairs, but again, we will post-inspect the commitment we made, 10% under, 5%, everything over £500. Financially, we'll go and look at them. So we will, by repeatedly going back, that's going to be the measure of it, that we came back and we didn't leave the home. I think that's where we'll see those benefits.
Yeah, thank you. That's good. And the reason for wanting to sort of break it down a little bit is when we started this evening, John kindly explained that we've got over 50,000 repairs annually, and that we've got 17,000 properties. And I'm trying to just break that down so that I can understand that a little bit better. How much is that is falling in sheltered housing? How much of it is falling to communal repairs? How much of it is falling to tenant repairs? So that's the management of process. So it's kind of, didn't give me ammunition, but John sort of has driven me a little bit more to try and use the management of repairs to completion as a way of answering the question that came to mind when he gave me those statistics.
I think, Councillor Alexander, I think we also need to understand about our stock. We've got 6 different types of stock, should we say, from a property angle point of view. Roughly, but that's how I see it. We've got 6 different types of, you've got Victorian, you've got Edwardian, you've got 1950s blocks, we got 1970s blocks, we get new blocks as well. So, we have got different types of ways and means about managing those particular properties. And I think now that we start and get that information from the stock condition survey analysis, which we haven't done for a long time, we're now understanding of saying about where the issues are. And that's why John was talking about the pilot, which we're doing up in, in White City. That's an area where we think that we can actually make a good difference and make a good impact. The final thing I would just also say, we're also talking about completion, we also do photographic evidence. So we make sure that our contractors and our surveyors take photographs and analyse what those photographs there, and we can then pass that information to the housing ombudsman if we do get a complaint about it, so that people can actually see what we're doing and actually show what we've actually undertaken. And that has actually improved our discussions with them, and that's why we are now starting to see service failures rather than always severe maladministration cases, which we've had in the past.
And just on that point of investment, or I suppose stock condition survey, understanding the stock, that then also sort of aligns closely with the work that we're doing to invest in the stock. So as you all know, there is a record-breaking £729 million over 12 years that's being invested in ensuring that our homes are modernised and fit for purpose for our residents. And I just think that's a really important point to emphasise, which ultimately then will inevitably have an impact on the repairs numbers. But I think Richard's really illustrates that point, and I hope that's helpful, Councillor Alexander, with regards to the makeup and the repairs and the and the data that you're requesting. Yeah, okay.
Thank you very much, councillor Ume. Do members have any more questions about how officers are responding to that housing ombudsman report? Okay, may I ask a question then? At the very beginning, John, you were talking about the task force, the chief executive task force that was set up in 2022. So that's been running for 2 years. Do you have any more details that you can talk to us about what those objectives are and how close you are to meeting the objectives of those task forces?
So, I mean, the task force focuses and surfaces and analyses and assesses, the key issues in housing at that time. So clearly things like repairs, complaints have been a great focus of that. But there are other areas of the housing service that come under scrutiny at task force. Richard referenced the Service Improvement Board, Damper Mould Action Group. There are a suite of sort of governance processes and meetings that sit below task force that different members of the senior leadership team in housing chair. But the most important issues go up to task force for chief exec scrutiny, to make sure that we deliver the requisite improvements. And as I said before, the kind of improvements we can see in complaints and repair statistics demonstrate that this process is working.
Richard, thank you,
Chair,
John.
just to add that it has been 2 years. It's been going about for 18 months. From November 2022, if I recall, ish.
I believe it was May 2022.
Okay, sorry. And then what I was also going to say is that I find them quite good because we are being challenged properly and appropriately by the senior leadership team to understand what's actually been happening, how we can actually improve on it. And also it allows us to actually have a corporate housing, to have a corporate understanding where the service needs to do and undertake. And I would like to say that everybody in the council has been very helpful while I've been Director of Housing to support us move the service forwards and find ways and means how we can actually help our residents to actually improve the service delivery.
Chair, and just to add, I think it just really goes to demonstrate that this is important. This is a priority, making sure that our residents have homes that are fit for purpose and a service that they can be proud of is, why we're all here, right? But for this administration, creating the CEO-focused task force, bringing senior leadership together around the table to really drive change forward is really living up to that commitment and investment and determination to do better. And John mentioned the Damper Mould Action Group, and that's a task force that's made up of different members from across the council, different teams. And I think it just goes to emphasize that cross-council collaborative approach to really driving change forward in a way that's, having spoken to other cabinet members across the country, they're sort of learning and understanding that actually this is quite an innovative approach, particularly when public health is involved, specifically with the Damper Mould Action Group. And it is that recognition and understanding about how intertwined housing is with the other areas within the council and how important it is to have all these groups that are focused on driving that change forward.
And the Ombudsman report recognises, an 86% reduction in damper mould, outstanding damper mould cases in Hammersmith and Fulham in the months in 2023 preceding that report. So, the results have been quite dramatic.
Thank you very much. Members, do members agree to note the report? Are there any other actions that we'd like to put forward? No? No? All right, lovely. And in which case, can we agree to note that report? And thank you very much, officers. There was a lot of talking. There's a lot to talk us through. And thank you for coming so very well prepared to answer all our questions. So members, the dates of the future meetings are the 23rd of July and the 12th of November, the 27th of January 2025, and then a whole year, hence the 23rd of April. A couple of items that we didn't get to at this meeting. And I think it's going to be really important to bring in quite a substantial piece, I think, on homelessness prevention and temporary accommodation. I noted that London councils announced that they spent £70 million in February just on temporary accommodation alone. And I think it's important for us to come back round and look at how that impacts on service here in Hammersmith and Fulham and for our residents, particularly, you know, in face of the ever escalating Section 21 no-fault evictions that residents are facing. I think that there is a piece on the private rented sector policy that I think that's out for consultation, that we really, I think we all really want to bring that in. And you know, a kind of a part of the future plan would be definitely looking at the voids management.
When are we having the voids?
When are we having the voids? I would like to sort of about how much time we need to dedicate to that. I don't want to see that as just being a small add-on piece. And I think that some of our reports are quite meaty that we bring to this committee, so we need to give it enough space. Should we take that offline? Councillor Alford, I'd love to have more of a conversation with you about that.
Sure. All
right, lovely, thank you. Okay, so that's the end of the meeting. Thank you very much, everybody, for attending, officers, Councillor Ume, and thank you to anybody watching tonight's meeting. And good evening.